the love of our 12th Imam, let us begin with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين سيدنا الممجد بشير المصدق المصطفى الأمجد محمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على الظالمين من الأولين والآخرين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد وقوله الحق: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن فرعون وهامان وجنودهما كانوا خاطئين. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Awaited Savior of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, my respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to part 7, our conclusion in our series Analyzing the Media, the way in which the challenges of mainstream media are brought to us, and the way in which you and I, inshallah, can navigate through those challenges. So far, if you kind of cumulatively put everything together and reflect on what we've been addressing, we have highlighted the multitude of ways in which media can affect the way in which you and I think, the way in which you and I perceive the world, the way in which you and I interact with the world. And therefore, because so many people are being affected by this machinery of various media outlets, what we've tried to do is demonstrate, of course, to the primary audience at hand, the types of challenges specifically to this audience that you will face. And those are in regards to the mainstream media, those are in regards to the ways in which those narratives have been built, the language that has been used, to whom those narratives appeal to, and the consequences of falling into some of those narratives. That is not to state that there aren't good journalists out there. That's not to state that there aren't good networks out there from which to get your news from. And so this evening, what we want to do is to be able to address certain conclusionary points. And those conclusionary points demand from us to be able to pull the series together and then ask ourselves where we can get trustworthy news from, and leave ourselves with some points of reflection about how you and I have responsibilities towards the media and how we can move forward going away from this particular series. Now, the first thing for us to think about is, based on everything I've shown you, and of course I have had a bias, I've tried to show you things in order to emphasize the points that I've been trying to make. You will rightly say, but what about this and what about that? But from the perspective of what I tried to demonstrate to you, there was obviously a number of different faults that can be pointed out from the media. The way in which they portray issues, the lack of research, the lack of objectivity, and so on and so forth. If you pull all that together and I asked you, what did you think about the media before I showed you what I showed you? And what do you think now of the media, the very same media outlets? What might be your responses? I imagine, by and large, you will end up saying something along the lines of, I didn't realize just how bad and inefficient some aspects of the media are. Or you might say, I'm not sure if I can trust the media any longer, or especially the mainstream media. And obviously, if you think about it, that was probably what I intended to show you in the first place. I wanted you to come away being skeptical of the types of narratives that are being created, the types of sources that are being used, in order for me to be able to address that point and then show you where you are able to take from. Imagine now, as the average consumer of news, what level of trust you have or you don't have with the mainstream media. It is interesting, as we've been talking about, that we live in a post-truth world and in a post-Trumpian world as well, or a present Trumpian world, with all of these queries about fake news, whether it's trustworthy, CNN are the so-called enemy of the people, and some of these pseudo-fascist statements. The average person generally doesn't trust the media. But imagine when you compare it to what I've shown you over these last 7 nights, where your levels of trust are to the media. And so the first thing I want to show you is some of the conclusionary challenges that we have. And that is the issue of how we rebuild the trust in the media. And by and large, the people here in this country, in the United States, there is a very poor level of trust towards mainstream media. Now, I'm going to show you a tweet from the first slide, a tweet from MSNBC. And in this tweet, MSNBC tend to be arguing that there is no problem. That actually the problem isn't with journalism. If there is a problem of trust, it's with you. Because we, in mainstream journalism, we're all doing a bang-up job. Everything you need to know, you know. All the sides of the story, you've got it at hand. All of these different scandals, you've properly understood them. So NBC began to go on a bit of a campaign and try to get people back to it. Why? Because of this question of trustworthiness. And so many people are now departing from mainstream media, going to fringe medias, getting their media from their echo chamber on their social media feeds and so on and so forth. So what you're finding is that as a response to this kind of lack of trustworthiness, the mainstream media has had to fight back. We are trustworthy. Don't go to the fringe. It's all fake news. Trump is right, it's fake news, but we're not the fake news. Everybody else is fake news. Now think about that. If on one side you've got Trump and his supporters calling all mainstream media, or the majority of mainstream media, fake news, the failing New York Times, the lying Washington Post, the enemy of the people CNN, which are all quotes of his, as you probably know. So from his side, all of that is fake. But from mainstream media, they're going, all the other stuff is fake. Don't listen to fringe outlets. Don't listen to independent outlets. Come back to us. We're the only ones that have the infrastructure to research and tell you what's true. Cumulatively, what happens to you as a society? There is a complete breakdown in trust. Now, if you research in other areas, there are certain sociological studies, for example, from Arnold J. Toynbee, other studies from Caroline Quigley, where they've researched about why civilizations rise and fall. Think about what happens when a society is at each other's throats and they don't know whom to trust. Their own media and everybody else's media. It's not a good place that this country is in when it comes to this issue. And if it continues, and it continues to be exhausted in this way, in this mindset, you have a very dangerous circumstance in front of you where you will no longer be able to trust anyone. You will no longer be able to trust each other. As a society, that is a cause for breakdown. So it requires us to do one of two things. Either to rebuild the trust in the media, or to burn it down and then restart the media all again. So here are questions when it comes to the conclusion tonight we have to think about. And we're going to come to some of the responses to some of these reflections and questions. Right? But here, to demonstrate the way in which MSNBC is responding to your fake news, no everybody's fake news, MSNBC put out a tweet recently which said the following from a quote from Chet Huntley. American journalism, all of it, is the best anywhere in the world. You can agree or you can disagree, that's up to you. According to Huntley, American journalism, all of it, is the best anywhere in the world. This land contains an incredible quality and quantity of good, common sense, and it is in no danger of being led down the primrose path by a journalist. What does it conclude with? This is when it matters, this is who we are. So now, MSNBC is almost taking ownership of Huntley's quote. This is who we are. We are the best. There's no reason to not trust us. Now juxtapose that with, for example, the works of someone like Professor Noam Chomsky. Chomsky has a very famous statement, and you may have come across his book, which I highly recommend to everyone to read, which is Manufacturing Consent. The way in which mainstream media manufactures your consent for the things in which it does. He has a very famous quote, whereby he says that the tyrants of the world are envious at the United States mainstream media by virtue of how complicit mainstream media is to the establishment. Whatever the establishment want, mainstream media goes along with it. So juxtapose or compare and contrast these two statements from something like Huntley versus something like Chomsky. It's problematic, isn't it? Because you've got Trump and his side going fake news. You've got mainstream media going, we're not fake news, they're all poor quality news, don't listen to them. And then you've got someone like Huntley who's saying everything is great, and then you've got Chomsky who's going, everything's broken. Mainstream. Can you see the problem and the trust factors? The outcome is, we don't know where to go. We don't know what to do. We don't know who to believe in. And worse than that, when we end up finding sources that we believe we can trust, we will then become exclusionary, exclusivist. We will no longer believe anything from anyone else. This creates a very combative society, which you're on the cusp of. This is problematic. It can't last. There has to be a solution to some of these challenges. Now, the next slide or link I wish to show you is to evidence some of these points that I'm making to you. And you will see here from a Gallup poll, Americans' trust in mass media sinks to a new low. Can we increase it in the... Perfect, thank you so much. So, for example, what do they point as the story highlights? 32% say they have a great deal or a fair amount of trust in mainstream media. That's 1 in 3, or 1 in 3 say they have a great deal of trust or a fair amount of trust, which means 2 in 3 people don't trust the media, the mainstream media. 14% of Republicans express trust, down from 32% last year. That's basically halved. So in 1 year, across 3 years of a Trump campaign and presidency, but in the last year, trust from the Republican Party in mainstream media is halved, which means they are going to go to their own sources more and more, and that's going to create more and more of an echo chamber. Now, do you remember we talked about the problem of the Overton window? So on the extreme right will be white supremacism, on the far right will be Breitbart, and then maybe center-right will be Fox, and then maybe slightly more center will be something else that they may listen to. But if that's your spectrum, and that's your Overton window in the brackets by which you're taking from, these kinds of things are very dangerous, because it pushes people further and further and further away into the outward spectrums of their political belief systems. And this is very, very dangerous. So now, the next clip, inshallah, I'll show you, is when I want to show you why you might find that trust is breaking down. Now, most people don't know this. And why I'm showing you this is the next point, is for you to combat the issue. or for you to explain it properly. Yeah? When you end up with people talking about fake news, I don't believe, MSNBC, I don't believe CNN, I don't believe Fox. This is a really interesting thing I want to show you. Can we get to the very top? Now, fair, and part of the discussion I'm going to do is go to trustworthy news sources or better news sources than some of the ones that I've been showing you over the last week. I will recommend to you fair.org, Challenging Media Bias since 1986. So if you're looking to note down where to get good quality news from, this is one organization that I would recommend to you. Now, FAIR, they did a research in the strikes, the airstrikes on Syria that happened only a few weeks back from Donald Trump. They looked at 26 major editorials. Now, you'd think a media would have the ability to challenge a narrative and actually query the legitimacy behind something, show another side of the coin. When we say, why should there be a breakdown in the trust? I don't think there should be a breakdown in the trust because this is right wing, this is left wing. That's always been there to some extent. The reason really why, when you argue, for example, there is a lack of trust in the media, this is the real reason why there should be a lack of trust in the media. Why? Because there isn't a proper second opinion in some of the most important issues, such as going to war over skeptical news, such as whether President Bashar al-Assad actually used chemical weapons or not on his own people. Out of 26 major editorials on Trump's Syria strikes, not one of those 26 mainstream outlets opposed the strikes. That's the reason why there's a problem in the mainstream media. That's the reason why you should be highlighting that there is a lack of trust from our side. Because if you can't be bothered to even ask the questions and raise it to your readers that there is something skeptical and that there are other news sources to prove to you that President Bashar al-Assad didn't use chemical weapons on his own people, if you can't even bring that up in order to oppose strikes, you have a media that is completely complicit with the establishment. And the only time that they will depart from that is when they have an even stronger financial reason to depart from that. When there is no financial reason to depart from the establishment, they will 100% be with the establishment. That's the reason why there is a lack of trust, or there should be a lack of trust. Not because someone calls them fake news or because he opposes me, my meaning, my ideals. That's not the reason to have a lack of trust in your media. This is a real reason to have lack of trust in your media. So when you correct people, or when you talk to them about why there is a lack of trust, you need to bring their thinking round. Not because their presidential candidate doesn't like the failing New York Times. It's because something like that. So now, what I want to show you is, because we have highlighted these problems, these are conclusions. Why we've highlighted these problems, what are the solutions that are coming? And I'm going to show you two solutions that are coming. One from Facebook and one from Elon Musk. The one from Facebook, we're going to play a video. And the one from Elon Musk, we're going to see a tweet and some thread that he's quoted. Now, why am I showing you these two? Because obviously, Facebook, for many millions of people, if not billions, is where they get their news from, primarily. Many of us, we may not sit there and go home and watch CNN, Fox News, and so on and so forth. Many of us will just open up our phone, Twitter, we'll open up our phone, Facebook, and the news will come to us by virtue of the echo chambers that we have created for ourselves. As you know, we started this discussion on the first night by talking about things like Cambridge Analytica and all of the, these things have been, Facebook and these platforms have been taken over by some of these elements that are able to manipulate what you see and what you don't see. As a result, Facebook, 2 weeks ago, had a conference, and as part of it, or they attended a conference, and as part of it, they came up with a solution for how to deal with poor quality news, fake news, where you're going to get good quality resource from. Elon Musk has challenged this, and he's going to offer you his own solution to this problem of untrustworthy news. So now I want to show you their solutions, and let's have a think about whether these are things that we can really trust. We'll start, inshallah, with Facebook. And then, can we dim the lights? Can we dim the lights so even for the camera it's easier for everyone to see? Maybe we need these ones here. Yeah, thank you very much. We'll first watch Facebook. It's a 10-minute clip, and then inshallah we'll go to see what Elon Musk says.
They just had the F8, which is their big summit where they make announcements about new developments on Facebook. And here is what's new. The company has begun implementing a system of ranking news organizations by trust, relying on user surveys to determine which news sources are broadly
trusted. So what does it say? The company, Facebook, has begun implementing a system. It's already started. Ranking news organizations by trust. But how are they going to know who's trustworthy and who's not trustworthy? User surveys to determine it. So you guys are now going to be in charge of what is trustworthy and what is not trustworthy. What we were stating to you in the last few days was an Islamic epistemology. That those people who themselves are misguided or follow every rebellious Satan, they are not people that you yourselves can follow. So what happens when now, look at the problem. News comes, that person himself doesn't know it's trustworthy or not. He ranks it to be good. It comes to the top of your news feed because it's so-called good. And then you end up following what that misguided person follows from a misguided reporter. That's basically what Facebook's solution is now. If you can continue, thank you so much.
Facebook. Of course, there's been like the whole fake news situation that has befallen them. Cambridge Analytica, people stopping the trusting of Facebook and saying things like, well, you need to come testify before Congress to get on the record about your practices and everything. And they are announcing a new system of ranking news based on what users think of the news services trustworthiness. What do you guys think about that? Where does your mind go? Positives, negatives, anything?
Yeah, great question, Ben. It just depends on what kind of news you subscribe to that you want to get on Facebook. For one, I've never gone the only news I get from Facebook is the drama that's happening in my hometown with people I went to high school with. Other than that, or ramblings of opinions of people that are mad about something.
Right.
It's like this echo chamber of just, I'm mad at the right, I'm mad at the left, my credit's terrible, I'm up, like just all that. So I think this could be a good thing, but how long till money seeps in and people start saying paying Facebook to make sure that their entity is at the top of the list?
That's so true. Here we have a quote from it, but we don't need to go to the graphic. It's the last, but I'll read it. This is Ian Bremmer, who was like, globalism got me here, globalism's wrong now kind of guy. He goes, my definition of a dystopia is a country or an environment where citizens get their news as determined and filtered by the world's largest advertising company. Yeah. Which, whatever you think of Ian Bremmer, like, that is an amazing thought.
Right.
I mean, yeah, what were you going to say?
No, I really think we already do this a little bit. You shop for the news that you want, you know? You shop for the news that reinforces your worldview, you know? I mean, I'll say this here at TYT, at least we take stock. You'll hear us say, well, you know, to be fair, and then we'll try to recognize an argument on the other side. Or I don't see a lot of that. I go over to Fox News to see what madness is going down there, and I don't see any sort of honest dialogue going on there. And maybe it's going on just at times I'm not watching. Now to Facebook and the news. So if you're already shopping for the news, then this strikes me as an extension of that. You're letting your subscribers, in essence, shop ahead of time and tell you, oh yeah, we don't like that, we do like this, and you're just going to get a consensus that reflects your subscriber base.
Here's what's so weird about it to me, is the whole idea of fake news getting the best of people. Obviously, it's a problem. I was watching the playoffs, right, and NBA playoffs, and there was an ad that ran. We have a video of it. This is the new ad. I watched it. I didn't know what it was for. I thought it was for like e-insurance or something. It turns out it was a Facebook ad, and here's a shortened version of that ad.
We came here for the friends. And we got to know the friends of our friends. And just like that, we felt a little less alone. But then something happened. We had to deal with spam, clickbait, fake news, and data misuse. That's going to change. Because when this place does what it was built for, then we all get a little closer.
This is the we're here together. No news in that. News is the enemy in that, right?
That's a great spot because it says we're going to hit the reset and get back to just being a community.
How true is that, though?
No, that's the point. It's a great spot, but it doesn't reflect the reality.
The fundamental issue is, sorry about what happened with the news. You guys were fooled in terms of what news seemed to be trustworthy. So our solution is to rely on you to tell us how trustworthy the news is. Right. You had the wool pulled over your eyes, which makes you a perfect candidate to tell us what is going on. The motivation behind that is, well, if you guys are saying it's trustworthy, it must not be a problem. It seems like they're shifting the potential blame onto the users.
They are. They're going to give themselves immediately high ground, right? They have high. Look, you guys decided. This isn't our responsibility. We don't have a board of journalists. Citizen journalists is what we're going to count on. You guys.
Right. It's like it's got to be kind of misreported. It has to be. They did say, Zuckerberg said, I'm going to be spending billions and billions of dollars by hiring, they say, 10,000 people on their end to go through and do it. But I don't know. It's just such a difficult situation for them to be in because so much of what people consume now is news. And if America is as polarized as he says it is, then a polarized group of people choosing what's newsworthy or what's respectable news and what's not, you're asking essentially the mob to determine what is the better side, and the mob's going to choose one side over what's respectable. It's just, I wonder.
So here you can see there are a number of problems in front of us. The first great problem is that we have allowed, inadvertently, a corporation to be so powerful that we are entirely reliant on it as a global community in order to service us for what is true and what is false in the world. That company has so much power, Facebook has so much global power, it then means that those who are in control of that entity ultimately have the most amount of power in the world. Do you remember we stated to you a couple of nights ago that the Quran said that there are going to be people at the end of time that have power over the world? أَنَّهُمْ قَادِرُونَ عَلَيْهَا. I mentioned to you Frank Luntz. Do you remember those things? You have a company here that has so much access to people's thinking. We are now going there for our truth, and it doesn't know how to respond adequately because it's constantly being hacked. You think there was only one Cambridge Analytica? That's constantly being hacked from multiple sides. In Brexit, out Brexit. Pro-Trump, anti-Trump. Pro-Putin, anti-Putin. Pro-Al Saud, anti-Al Saud. It's constantly being hacked by every side. Having then been caught out, as you heard, its solution is, well, we can't deal with all this. What we're going to do is we're going to hire 10,000 staff, and they are going to keep a check constantly. Their paid job is to constantly review what is placed on Facebook and determine whether it's fake or not. So your question would obviously be what? By what rules are they going to determine what is fake and what is not? If you've got 10,000 people trawling through Facebook paid to check everything that is uploaded, by what standards are they working to? So what did they then say? Facebook then said, well, we're then going to dump the entire responsibility on you. Can you see how it's circular? So those people who are in favor of Breitbart, they're going to click, this is 100% true, 100% true, 100% true. Now, if you've got people who are working for Facebook, paid, What are their standards? Do they think Breitbart is factual or not? But then the people are saying Breitbart, in this example, are 100% factual. There's a clash here. The people believe Fox News, the people believe CNN, but how does that then affect the way the 10,000 workers on Facebook are determining what's true and not true? Can you see the problem? So what did they do? They lumped it all onto you and said, we take ourselves out of the equation, you tell us what is true and what is not true. But you don't know what's true in the first place. How then are you making the decision? What did the Quran state? You can't follow those uncertainties. Those people who are misguided in the first place, and then follow up with them and then proclaim that they are true. We live in a world, in a challenge that is completely, in this level of globality, this is the first type of challenge we've come across of this nature before. In Mecca and Medina, those kinds of problems existed where they didn't know whom to trust. There was a multitude of sources. People are saying this and that about the Prophet, about Islam. Whom determined what was correct? The people self-regulated and said, the leadership, we believe them because they're the leadership of the tribes. We'll believe Abu Sufyan. We'll believe Abu Jahl. Can you see? The same problems that were existing 1400 years ago with the Prophet are coming back to haunt us at the moment, but at the global level. So this is the solution that is being created by our friends from Facebook. You can determine whether you agree with these solutions or not. My question to you now is, can you click out of this? What date was this? Go down, and what date was this? May the 5th. So this is only a couple of weeks back. How many people heard that Facebook are now putting the onus on you to tell them what is true? How many people? Hands up. One. Did you have your hand up? Half hand. Two. Two people of you. How many of you use Facebook? Hand up. The majority of you. Yeah? Yet, only two of you knew that their guidelines for the most important topic, fake news, their elections being hacked, you're now going to be responsible for whether you know the election is being hacked or not. Can you see the problem? So let's have a look at Elon Musk, and we're going to go to his Twitter feed, and we're going to see what our friend Musk says. And I'm sure many of you, all of you probably know who Elon Musk is. And look what he says in one of his tweets. Going to create a site where the public can rate the core truth of any article and track the credibility score over time of each journalist, editor, and publication. Okay, this is interesting. He's going to make a site, and the entire site is going to track the truth. Who has to track the truth? Who is going to do that job of tracking the credibility of it and giving the score of it and scoring how trustworthy the journalist is, how trustworthy the editor is, and how trustworthy the publication is? So now the publication may be trustworthy, but the journalist may do a poor job. The journalist may be great, but the publication may be poor. How do you know who edited it? Who's this all falling on? You. Elon Musk is again asking what Facebook is asking, but instead of using Facebook, he wants to create his own service. Who is now going to be ultimately in charge of what you believe is true and what is not true? Elon Musk. Because he's the one that owns that site. What did we tell you earlier? All of these sites, they can be independent, they can be biased, they can be neutral. All of these have problems with them. So again, you're all now going to turn to Elon Musk. Elon Musk is now in charge. Who says he's going to be a good guy? Who says he's going to be honest? Who says he doesn't have his own machinations and plans to determine what's true and what's not true? Whether he's going to tell you this publication is going to support his businesses or be anti his businesses. If there's going to be a journalist that exposes his businesses, for example, do you think Elon Musk is going to put him at the very top? His publication at the very top? You're going to allow him to speak truth to power? We're in the same mire that we are now. these solutions, are they real solutions for you and I? Can we enlarge the text slightly? Is that possible? Thank you very much. He follows up. Even if some of the public doesn't care about the credibility score, the journalists, editors and publications will. It is how they define themselves. So now we require the media internally to rate the media. Create a media credibility rating site that also flags propaganda and botnets. 88% of people think that this would be good. 12% said, no, the media is already awesome. He says, come on media, you can do it. He's cheerleading. Come on media, you can do it. Get more people to vote for you. You are literally the media. You can tell people what to vote for. He's mocking them. Amazingly, the media is awesome, vote is declining, despite hundreds of articles attacking this very poll. The media responded to Elon Musk and said, what are you doing? Yet, the public are in agreement with Elon Musk. All the contradictions are flying. We don't know what to do. We don't know where to go. So now, Glenn Greenwald, do we have the original tweet from Glenn on this point? Is it this one here? Lovely. So now Glenn Greenwald. So I've mentioned to you some places where to get good journalism from. I will 100% recommend Glenn Greenwald. Not everything we agree with that he says, but what I mean is he is a good source to see other types of journalism. I would recommend looking at Glenn Greenwald. And he works for an organization called The Intercept, or he runs an organization called The Intercept. That would be another organization I would recommend for you guys to take your news from, The Intercept. Greenwald responds to Elon Musk's tweet. It's true that trust in US media has collapsed. Also true, they have done a lot to cause this and engage in almost no self-critique, and thus can't fix it. Those who are the cause of the problem, he argues, can't fix it. But the absolute last thing anyone needs is a billionaire angry about negative reporting, spitefully using his wealth in vengeance against the media. His take is, Musk is cheesed off with the media. He's just doing this in spite of the media. And he's got so much money to burn. What difference does it make if I put a few hundred million to destroying the media who's against me? So what do you find here? Facebook has offered you a solution. Musk has offered you a solution. And Greenwald has intimated a solution. That the problem has been that internally there's been no self-critique. Now, you may have heard our friends over at Facebook, who's the head of Facebook? Mark Zuckerberg, only a couple of days back went to go and testify in front of the European Union. Have you guys heard about that, or you didn't hear about that? Yeah? So what came from that was that the person, or one of those who were interrogating Zuckerberg, his argument was, we, the international community, European Union, have to regulate Facebook. You've proven incapable of self-regulating, and these sorts of answers aren't good enough because there's so many flaws within them. We now have to regulate you. So now the probability will be that the most powerful company in the world, one of them, is going to be regulated by the European Union. I pose a question. Will American capitalism allow? Will Congress regulate Facebook? What will Facebook say? Facebook will say, if you regulate us, you have to regulate everyone else. You have to regulate Twitter, you have to regulate Instagram, you have to regulate CNN, you have to regulate Fox. Can you imagine the roadblock Congress already has with coming out with laws, let alone having to regulate the media? Why? Do you remember that clip I showed you from one of the first nights? The inception, it was on the second night, the inception of the problem was Congress didn't regulate media in the outset. What was the first point? Congress didn't state the media should work for you. It allowed external funding to come in, which means it was all about ratings and advertising. It worked for the financiers. All because they didn't regulate it at the beginning. Now they're having to deal with this question now of regulation 100 years later. It's very interesting what's happening in front of you and how this story is panning out. Now, what I wish to do is go to the issue of whom we should be taking from. And I'm going to go to first some names, and I'm going to come back to this video shortly. What I want to do is show you some people who I would recommend that you get news from. I'm not going to go through them all, but the slides will be available, the names will be available, and I'm inviting you to take your news from the following people. That's not to say don't take from any others. So what I'm going to preface you is with the following. Take your news from as wide a source as possible. Feel free to watch Fox, feel free to watch MSNBC, feel free to watch BBC, Al Jazeera. Feel free to take from the people that I'm recommending. Why? Because the wider your understanding of what's happening in the world and the various views, the more informed you will be as a human being. You will say to me as response, I ain't got the time for that. Fine, you, meaning me, you can sit there all day wasting your time watching every single outlet in the world in order to scrutinize and then tell us what's going on. But we don't have time for that. We have to work, we have to go to school, you tell us where to get the news from. And actually, I think in the second night, someone came up to me after the lecture and said, can you just get to the end and tell us where to get our news from? Was it you, Cookie? Was it you who said that? Someone who came up to me and said, just tell us, for God's sake, where do we get our news from? I said, chill, relax, I'm going to bore you for 7 nights, and then I'm going to tell you where to get your news from. But you'll say, just tell us where to get news from. And I'm saying to you, number one, try to get your news from as wide a news as possible, even if it's places that you don't like, that you might fundamentally disagree with, so that you hear what's going on in the world. But I'm also telling you where good news comes from. Good sources may be coming from networks and from individual journalists. And when I go through some of these individual journalists, I'm going to show you what they're specialists at, where their areas of writing and expertise are on, so that if you want to get good news in certain areas, you know whom to follow. So please, write some of them down, go onto your phone, write some of them down, the ones that you like the sound of, get your news, follow them on, Facebook, Twitter, search what they have, keep up to date with good news sources when you want to know what's going on in the world. So we're going to go through some of it, and then I'm going to show you a video before you get too bored, and then we'll come back and finish this off, inshallah. Okay, so my thanks to Cookie and to Sister Ramla for actually typing these up and helping me be able to present these to you. I appreciate your time. So, Brother Miqdad Versi is the Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Britain. I will recommend that you follow him because Miqdad will give you good sources. Miqdad will tell you what's happening to the Muslim community. Now, by and large, a lot of his work will focus primarily on what's happening to Muslims in the UK, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have an effect on Western Europe and on the United States of America. Next. Eva Bartlett, I would say to you, if you want to know what's going on in Syria, and you are tired of all of the multiplicity of different arguments of people telling you this person did this person did that, get the truth from this person. Now, I'm not saying everything she says is 100%. I'm saying by and large, I am recommending you can go to these sorts of people. Eva Bartlett is a specialist for what's happening in occupied Palestine and what's happening in Syria. Especially around Syria today, there is a lot of strange news. People saying that Bashar al-Assad gassed his own people, chemical weapons on his own people, silly things that aren't true. Eva Bartlett, I'm recommending. Good ethical journalists that are very UK based, but also sometimes will go wider. Amongst these names, Krishna Guru Murthy is very good. This is more UK than US, but because we have other people watching, I'm recommending widely. Krishna Guru Murthy is a very good journalist. Others in this list, Faisal Islam is another good source for Muslims to be able to know what's happening in the Muslim world. Next. Oh, sorry, go up. Ethical journalism, that's a network, definitely. If you want to follow a good network of journalists that are principled, their whole network is called ethical journalism. Get your news from ethical journalism. That network. That's not a journalist, that's a network of journalists. Next slide. If you want to know what's going on in Yemen, I would recommend to you Ahmed al-Ghobari. He is a freelance Yemeni journalist. Very good sources from him. Next. Clayton Swisher is brilliant as an investigative reporter, investigative journalist. You want to know, what's behind the curtain? Swisher is excellent. Next. Again, got one. Andrew Fowler is also an investigative reporter. Brilliant. Again, these people I'm recommending to you will dig hard, expose what's happening in the world that mainstream journalism will not want to tell you about. He used to work for ABC, but he is an independent investigative reporter. Very good. Next. Southern Poverty Law Center. It's not a specific media outlet, but in terms of the kind of dialogue that we're having in the world today about racism and prejudice, if you want to see the truth of what is really happening with racism and prejudice especially in the United States of America, Southern Poverty Law Center has been combating hate, intolerance and discrimination since 1971. I would really recommend seeing what they put out in order to be up to date, to respond to the type of journalism that comes from some right-wing sources that would try to claim certain ideas around racism and prejudice. Next. Noel Al-Maghathi, excellent, and you'll see that she focuses on the Middle East. She is the RTS Young Talent of the Year. I would recommend following her. Next. Now, because there is a question around your politics, and if you want to know what's happening in your politics, it's normally left and right, isn't it? So, if you've noticed, I've been playing you certain clips from the Young Turks. It should be obvious I'm recommending the Young Turks, and that doesn't mean I'm recommending everything that comes from them. I tend to disagree with a lot that comes from the Young Turks, but by and large, it is a good place from which to see more in-depth journalism. Now, in terms of right and left, in terms of the left wing and centre-left wing, the Democrats are splitting into two. What you have is Democrats and Justice Democrats. Justice Democrats are those people who will not accept corporate money. The vast majority of all the Democratic candidates will take from the same donors that the Republican Party will take from. So they're beholden to the same financiers. And I showed you the last couple of days what happens when your financiers hold you to certain things when you become in office. And if any of you have had experience with working in offices, you know exactly what happens with corporate sponsorship. Justice Democrats are Democrats who run for the party and for Congress, but will not take corporate donors. They will only take money from you and I, the normal people. That means they're not beholden to corporate donors. I would recommend you following that group. Next. Democracy Now! Democracy Now! Is generally a very good anti-war outlet, very much more detailed, reflective on certain issues that maybe people like you and me would care about. They have two anchors, Amy Goodman and Juan Gonzalez. I would recommend you following Democracy Now! And you'll probably end up seeing a lot of people from The Intercept. You'll end up seeing a lot from people like Professor Chomsky and those kind of people going on Democracy Now! Next. Murtaza Muhammad Hussain, phenomenal journalist. I will say a lot of what I have presented to you, or the ideas of what I have been presenting to you, some of which has come from Murtaza Muhammad Hussain. Brilliant journalist, really recommend him. You won't go wrong most of the time. I think what comes from him is very precise, very accurate. I'm going to now go back to a video, and we're going to come back to this screenshot and come back. The next video I want to show you is one of my favorite journalists in the United States. In fact, probably my very favorite journalist in the entirety of the US. Jimmy Dore has his own show, The Jimmy Dore Show, and Jimmy Dore often will go on the Young Turks, or he's part of the Young Turks network, who I've already recommended, and I've shown you many clips from Cenk Uygur, who I've also recommended to you. I'm going to show you the difference, and I'm going to show you what kind of stuff these people that I'm recommending to you come out with, and I'm going to show you how good a journalist Jimmy Dore is. Just for a few minutes, and then we go back to some of these recommendations, and we make some conclusions, and we'll finish, inshallah. So we'll play this clip for a few minutes, and we'll see what Jimmy Dore is like. He's my favorite commentator out of all US journalists.
It's the world champion Judah Friedlander. Hi, Judah.
What's up? Good to be here.
Now, check out Judah's Netflix special. It's called America is the Greatest Country in the United States, and it's up for a Webby Awards. Everybody check that out. Go to judahfriedlander.com, right?
That is correct.
All right. It's a great special. Look at our other video about it. But right now we're talking about what's happening in Syria. Today's Monday. And I just want to remind what people, what FDR said in 1936. He said, "We had to struggle with the old enemies of peace. Business and financial monopoly, speculation, reckless banking, class antagonism, sectionalism, and war profiteering."
FDR stated in 1936, we had to struggle with the old enemies of peace. We're at war with certain groups who are the enemies of peace. Business, financial monopoly, speculation, reckless banking, class antagonism, sectionalism, and war profiteering. All these things are enemies of peace. You press play.
That's what's going on right now. We're dealing with the old enemies of peace. Business and finance monopoly, speculation, reckless banking, class antagonism, sectionalism, and war profiteering. That's what's happening right now. That's why we're in Syria. And I saw this. I thought this was great. And Syria bombing. Editor's note. Do you support the missile attack in Syria? And she responds, I'm just thankful that Syria didn't bomb us for poisoning the children in Flint or gassing the natives at Standing Rock. So you see what
So basically what was said is, well, if you bombed, the United States bombed Syria on the argument that Bashar al-Assad poisoned his own people, why didn't the United States bomb its own in Flint, Michigan, who have been being poisoned for a number of years?
So you see what's about Egypt. You get that right?
She's a great joke writer.
Yeah.
I mean, in addition to being on point, she's a great joke writer.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great joke. That's like perfectly written joke there.
I'd like to hire her.
Yeah, she's great.
So now what I want to do is very quickly just remind people that we have a history of inventing a pretend problem that we can then invade someone's country and steal their natural resources. So let's go back. We all know that Vietnam was based on the Gulf of Tonkin, which turned out to be not true. So the whole Vietnam War was pretend. Well, it wasn't pretend, it was real and it was horrible, but it was on a pretend reason. And then the next one was the Gulf War, the first Gulf War with 1991, George Herbert Walker Bush. And I don't know if you remember it, there was a problem. The people didn't want to go to war because we still remembered Vietnam, even in 1991. And so they had to figure out a way to get people to go on board with it. And what they usually do is propaganda. And here's this is a great little piece that explains what happened.
Iraq attacks Kuwait, claiming the Kuwaitis are slant drilling into Iraq's oil fields. U.S. President George Herbert Walker Bush pushes for a land war against Iraq. But polls show the U.S. public is split 50-50 on that idea. Then comes this eyewitness testimony.
So the country split 50-50 on us going into Kuwait and Iraq. And then
or a congressional committee. From a 15-year-old Kuwaiti girl, the claim is she cannot be identified for fear of reprisals.
So we have to keep this 15-year-old girl whose testimony is going to swing the war. We have to keep her identity a secret because someone might come to get her for telling the...
So what's happening here is he's saying, we've all gone into Syria, we've bombed Syria, and we have a history of making up complete rubbish in order to go to war with people so we can steal their oil. He's trying to prove this, and he's going to prove it with Gulf War I. And he's saying that when George Bush Sr. wanted to go to war with Iraq in the first Gulf War, the population in the United States was split 50-50. Yes, we should go, no, we shouldn't go to war. So what did the people do? They brought in this young girl in order to make a testimony on something. And she's going to testify she saw babies in incubators taken out and killed. And because Saddam was doing that, or the argument was that was taking place, that testimony prior to Gulf War I was what convinced the American public to support Bush Sr. in going to war with Iraq. He's going to show to you that that was absolute lies. That never happened. But the entire country went to war off the base of lies. Have a look.
Here we go.
When I was there, I saw the Iraqi soldiers coming to the hospital with guns. They took the babies out of the incubators. Took the incubators and left the children to die on the cold floor.
The U.S. public is outraged. The result? Support for land war zooms.
Boom! That's all it took. That's all it took was that testimony. And I remember, I'm old enough to remember when that's before the internet, when that happened. And I remember that being on the news, all ubiquitously shown on the news about how horrible. And I was like, oh my God, we have to attack. And here,
turning point. Desert Storm is launched. 135,000 Iraqis are killed. An estimated 1 million Iraqis, many of them children and old people, then die as a result of 10 years of sanctions. One small problem. There never were any incubator baby deaths. Not one. The Canadian Broadcasting Corporation's investigative flagship program, The Fifth Estate, reveals the girl to be the Kuwaiti ambassador's daughter, given her lines and coached in acting by the giant American PR firm Hill & Knowlton. It's one phase in a $10 million joint U.S.-Kuwaiti campaign of deception.
A US PR firm paid the daughter of a Kuwaiti in order to stand in front of the world with scripted words to say that something happened when it didn't happen. And off the back of that testimony, Gulf War I happened. 100,000 people died and 1 million people were killed from sanctions.
Man is lying.
I myself buried 14 newborn babies that had been taken from their incubators.
This man is lying.
And they had kids in incubators, and they were thrown out of the incubators so that Kuwait could be systematically dismantled.
There were a lot of people who participated in a conspiracy. Yes, an out-and-out conspiracy of fake organizations, false documents, fraud, and disinformation.
So now you know the rest of the story on the first Gulf War. Do you remember the first Gulf War?
Yes, I do. I believe it was 90-91.
Yeah. Yes. And
Desert Shield, and then it was Desert Storm.
Yes. And what was your feeling about it at the time?
Yeah, not good. Yeah. Probably.
I didn't know better. At the time, I didn't know better.
Yeah.
I believed the news reports. I believed that they were doing that stuff. I didn't know any better. There wasn't the internet back then.
Yeah, I remember, I think, being against that. The next Gulf War, I remember I initially was like, these guys know how awful Vietnam went and things like that. They're not going to make that same mistake again. They're not going to risk, then I was like, quickly I realized, oh, no, it's the same old thing. Yeah.
Well, here's Colonel Wilkerson who was the chief of staff to Colin Powell during the first Gulf War. And here's what he had to say about that first Gulf War. Here's what he says about it.
Well, let me just back up a little bit and say that the first Gulf War, which of course was Powell's first we're going to cut it off and then we're going to kill it with regard to the Iraqi army, opened my eyes to a certain extent about the Middle East and about the Strait of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf and Saudi Arabia and others. The reason we fought that war was not to oppose UN mandates. It was not to prove that the New World Order was going to be established well by George Herbert Walker Bush. It was to protect oil. The reason we put forces down in the desert early was to keep Saddam Hussein from turning right and going into Saudi Arabia. We knew if he did, his tanks would roll over the 82nd Airborne Division we put on the ground, but his tanks would be rolling over U.S. soldiers, and that would be casus belli for sure. So my eyes began to be opened even more in this pragmatic way as to why the United States was using force in the world these days. In this case, it was all about oil. Of course, that would come back again in 2003 when we re-invaded Iraq and threw out all kinds of aspersions for reasons to the contrary, but we still were going back for oil, basically. So this is a continuity, if you will, that gets established in terms of abusing me of my naivete, what little is left as to why the United States in the post-World War II period uses force so often.
Now, before so there you have it. We went to the Iraq first time for oil. We went there the second time for oil. And we had to lie to the American public to do it. So your government lies to you to get you to go to war. And
Chief of Staff Colin Powell states, we only went in there for oil. We lied. We made everything up. So I'm recommending my favorite commentator as this guy, Jimmy Dore. Can we go back to the list? And the PPT. And we last spoke about Murtaza Mohammed Hussein, who is an excellent journalist for The Intercept. And as I mentioned to you, The Intercept is a good news source to go to. Next. El Reeve works for Vice News, very good investigative journalism. Next. Noor Samaha, journalist covering the Levant, Syria, another good resource for us. This one I'm really recommending. I really want you guys to pay attention to this one. As you know, the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, has all but been gutted by the Trump administration. Some of those basically broke free and created their own rival EPA news source. So it's called US EPA Ungagged. So those people who used to work for the EPA and are concerned about the environment, and that is the biggest problem in the world today, global warming, climate change, whatever you want to call it, Frank Luntz. It is the biggest issue in the world today. Some of those who used to work for the EPA were able to keep certain documents before they were disposed of, and they came and set up this organization. So as you read, ungagged news, meaning what's coming from the EPA at the moment is gagged. Links, tips and conversation that the US Environmental Protection Agency is unable to have with you, not directly affiliated with EPA, meaning they are indirectly. The good people are working together. Definitely recommend here. Next. Mehdi Hassan, we don't agree with everything he says, but he's a very, very good journalist, highly recommended. Next. Glenn Greenwald, we mentioned to you earlier on from The Intercept. Next. Manar. I will openly tell you, Sister Manar is my hero. I can't speak higher of Sister Manar, and I say to you, she is someone that I wish all the best in the world for the work that she is doing. She is the head of an organization called Mint Press News. I really recommend everyone get their news from Mint Press. And as the creator of Mint Press, Sister Manar is my hero, and I really wish that she is successful, inshallah. Next. Some other journalists that I'm just listing here for you: Callum May from BBC. The next one I'm going to really recommend to you, and I recommend everybody follows his work. He works for an organisation called Middle Eastern Eye. Middle Eastern Eye are neutral. They put both sides of the argument. They'll tell you what's happening from the Saudi perspective, yani Al Saud, and they'll also tell you what's happening in Iran, and be honest, and they allow journalists to expose both sides. So obviously, I will recommend good journalists from Middle Eastern Eye. Peter Osborne, or Oborn, is the person I would 100% recommend. Brilliant. Alongside him, a gentleman by the name of Robert Fisk. Fisk is an expert when it comes to what's happening in Lebanon, particularly Hezbollah, and is the best journalist for you to get what's happening in the Middle East, what's really happening on the ground. Robert Fisk. Next slide. So here we have given to you a number of recommendations by which you can get good news from. Ultimately, as I stated, listen to many places. What I'm going to do is conclude with one last video, and we have finished the entirety of our series. You remember that I started with the HBO show The Newsroom. Do you remember I mentioned to you that there's a really good TV series which analyzes the media, will explain things to you brilliantly from the perspective of a mainstream HBO series? Here, there is an argument that takes place. And the argument is that we can't fix the news. There's going to be a debate. The editor-in-chief, she is going to argue that we can fix the media. And she's going to argue how we can fix the media. And the argument she's going to make is, we need to be involved, and we need to be the ones who are honest. If we do our job properly, we will make the difference. The main journalist, the anchor, Will McAvoy, is going to argue back. He's going to say, we can't fix the media. It's too idealistic for you to want to fix the media. We don't have enough say. And they're going to have a dialogue and an argument. And the argument, as you can see, is an idealistic argument versus a realistic argument. I'm sure you all know the difference between realism and idealism. I'm an idealist. So you're going to see she is going to argue for the idealist, and you're going to see Will McAvoy argue from the realist perspective. Please pay attention. Last video I'm going to show you for the whole series, and see the beauty of the debate. And then I want you guys to think about how we can fix the media. Inshallah, you and I will have an opportunity to discuss that.
There's nothing that's more important in a democracy than a well-informed electorate.
I just want to make sure you know you're still on this side of the door.
When there's no information, or much worse, wrong information, it can lead to calamitous decisions and clobber any attempts at vigorous debate. That's why I produce the news.
We're all grateful to you.
You're spinning out of control.
No, I'm not.
You're terrified you're going to lose your audience, and you'd do anything to get them back. You're one pitch meeting away from doing the news in 3D.
This isn't non-profit theater. It's advertiser-supported television. You know that, right?
I'd rather do a good show for 100 people than a bad one for 1 million, if that's what you're saying.
What is it you're talking to me about right now?
I've come here to produce a news broadcast that more closely resembles the one we did before you got popular by not bothering anyone. Leno.
I think Jay and I would rather be employed if it's all the same to you.
It's not all the same to me, you punk. I've come here to take your IQ and your talent and put it to some patriotic use. And where does it say that a good news show can't be popular?
Nielsen ratings.
We're going to do a good news show and make it popular at the same time.
That is impossible.
Between your brains, charm, looks and affability and my
refusal to live in reality. It's impossible, man. Our social scientists have concluded that the country is more polarized than at any time since the Civil War. The Civil War.
Yes, people choose the news they want now, but we
people
overcome
choose the
that.
facts they want now.
So what you've just described is impossible.
Only if you think an overwhelming majority of Americans are preternaturally stupid.
I do.
I don't. And if you let me, I can prove it. You know what you left out of your sermon? That America is the only country on the planet that since its birth has said over and over and over that we can do better. It's part of our DNA. People will want the news if you give it to them with integrity. Not everybody, not even a lot of people. 5%. And 5% more of anything is what makes the difference in this country. So we can do better. What?
I'm thinking. Yeah, that whole speech did nothing for me.
Now I'd like you to listen to these words which were written 500 years ago by Don Miguel de Cervantes. Hear me now, O thou bleak and unbearable world, thou art base and debauched as can be. But a knight, with his banners all bravely unfurled, now hurls down his gauntlet to thee. That was Don Quixote.
Those words were written 45 years ago by the lyricist Fernando La Mancha.
Didn't think you'd know that, but the point's still the same. It's time for Don Quixote.
You think I'm him?
No, I think I'm him. You're his horse.
You rode a donkey.
Well, I can't help you there.
I have to ride my...
I'll write it for you. The volcanic eruption in Iceland is believed to have started on March 20th and has led to a worldwide transportation disaster. The suspension of air traffic was in no way caused by America, which I love. You have to believe me.
You want me in the same shouting match as everybody else?
I want you to not apologize for saying something.
All right.
You got yourself in the shouting match when you took vertigo meds, and I'd have you winning it.
And what does winning look like to you?
Reclaiming the fourth estate. Reclaiming journalism as an honorable profession. A nightly newscast that informs a debate worthy of a great nation. Civility, respect, and a return to what's important. The death of bitchiness, the death of gossip and voyeurism. Speaking truth to stupid. No demographic sweet spot, a place where we all come together. We're coming to a tipping point. I know you know that. There's going to be a huge conversation. Is government an instrument of good, or is it every man for himself? Is there something bigger we want to reach for, or is self-interest our basic resting pulse? You and I have a chance to be among a few people who can frame that debate.
That's... It's...
Quixotic?
You switch on the light. So, here, quixotic, something that's exceedingly idealistic. Can we really fix the media? Can we really fix the news? The answer is really simple. We have to be involved. We have to be the ones to bring about change. So I'm going to make one final recommendation, and that is not just following the right sources, spreading the right sources. It's for you to be involved. We as a community, especially as second and third generation immigrants, have historically been focused on becoming doctors and pharmacists. And that's very important to have people in the medical professions. We also felt that if people didn't go into these, somehow they were failing. And we also prohibited our children and our youth from going into political sciences, from going into media sciences. And as a result, we have all but stayed out of that. We are in need of shifting our thinking. We are in need of being present in the media, in all different forms of being able to put our points of view across. So my last recommendation to you is this: be involved yourself, where you can. When you have youth, encourage them to read widely, encourage them to be involved, and if they wish to be having a profession, a career in these areas, don't discourage them. We need to fight back. We need people to know the truth, and without your involvement, we will never be able to make the changes from within the system to be able to make those changes. Here, inshallah, we have had 7 parts looking at the media. I think we've covered it in a lot of depth. I think, inshallah, you probably go away from here thinking differently as to how you approach some of the elements of news. And I hope, inshallah, this series has been of benefit. I ask for your forgiveness for the shortcomings in this series, and also sincerely ask your constructive criticism and feedback. I hope, inshallah, you will also spread the names of those journalists and networks that we have recommended, and inshallah all of us will be more informed and in a position to help others become more informed. Walhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa nabiyyina Muhammad wa alihi at-tahirin. If you have any questions, clarifications, then inshallah we have 5 minutes for that.
Sheikh, would you be able to have that PPT available for us? If you could post it on our website or...
All the PPTs are available to be used, and this one in particular with the names of some of the journalists. You are welcome to be able to spread that amongst the community, inshallah. Again, disclaimer, not everything that they write will be 100%, but by and large we recommend them to you. Is there anything from the sisters?
Sheikh, this series was very good for the Western countries and also for US, but a lot of senior citizens like me, they listen to the Pakistani news. And some of the brothers, they said that please request Sheikh what he thinks about the channels in Pakistan and GOA.
I have no knowledge of those channels. I don't speak the language. It's not something I equate myself with on a regular basis. So as you notice, the majority of the clips I've used have all been US mainstream based. If I was doing this to a UK based audience, I would be choosing different clips. So I can't speak as an authority on Pakistani news, but as a regular watcher, maybe you can come do a mini series for us on which Pakistani channels we can trust and which we can't.
I watch regularly Press TV and Sahar TV. They are from, they are really very.
Press TV and?
Sahar TV.
Sahar TV, RT. We've mentioned these on previous nights as well. That we can go there for our news as well. So we didn't want to so for example, I didn't mention the Young Turks again, because we've already mentioned them as examples. But Press TV, of course they have bias, and they're going to show things from certain angles. But again, I would recommend RT, recommend Press TV.
And also, this Vilayat TV also has this...
Say again?
Vilayat TV and Ladak TV.
Vilayat TV, Ahlul Bayt TV. I would also recommend the Muslim Vibe. Have you come across the Muslim Vibe? It's not news. It's not a news organization, so I can't recommend it for news. But as a space for the social Muslims by which to get certain elements of news, articles, it's very, very good. And again, just like I mentioned, Sister Manar, the brothers who started the Muslim Vibe, 2 heroes. We need more of that kind of thing from our own community.
There's one TV like Wind TV from India.
Wind TV, definitely. I know the head of Wind TV, Imran Rasool, very trustworthy. His daughter as well is also in the media, but more in virtual reality issues of media. She's excellent as well. Imran Rasool is phenomenal. Wind TV is very good as well. But I don't think it's a news organization. It's more an Islamic channel. Yeah. So again, I can't. Those things are outside of the scope of our discussion. But Wind TV is excellent. But it's not news per se. These are journalists and networks of journalists.
What about something like Zainab Merchant's blog, Zainab Rex?
Excellent. Again, definitely recommend Sister Zainab and the work that she does. Sister Zainab Merchant, Zainab Writes, another excellent organization, challenges the establishment narrative, provides videos, mini films, another excellent organization to be able to use.
And like is Michael Moore or Fahrenheit 9/11 is
Excellent. Michael Moore, I didn't think of him. Yep. Say again? Yeah, Michael Moore is very good. I mean, some of the documentaries he's done. Fast Food Nation, did he do Fast Food Nation? What was the one? What was the one where he follows those guys who... Super Size Me, thank you very much. I'm getting the two mixed up. Fast Food Nation is a different one. Super Size Me, excellent journalist. And actually he predicted Donald Trump. whilst others, the two people that predicted Donald Trump, I mean, no one in the mainstream media thought he would win from the outset. I'm talking about when he started, even at the point of the primaries. At the point of the primaries, the two people that predicted he was going to win the presidency was Michael Moore and Cenk Uygur. Everyone laughed. Third person who predicted that he would win overall, I predicted. I said he would win.
There was like because other day I was talking about like Pakistani media. I see this thing like echo
chambers.
Yeah, because and they are very organized. They are skillful, and they have tested this thing so many times. As you mentioned other day, like they have done it to blacks, to Hispanics, and now Muslims. So I see they are doing those things to other countries too. Like I belong to Pakistan, so I constantly watch TV, and I see a dramatic change in like this overturned window, and like you switch any channel and same thing, morning show, same thing, same like they are talking about
all the same thing. Exactly. It's now the practice of the media to be able to do this. One of the brothers asked a really good question. He said, look, if I try to show the average Joe some of these things, they'll say it's conspiratorial. You know, they won't listen to some of these things. Oh, RTV, it's Russian. Press TV, it's Iranian. So what I've shown you here is that there are journalists who are from within the US that are able to provide you an alternative narrative. So when people ask you, you know, I don't want to listen to these things, I only trust CNN. A lot of people I've shown you are also fairly mainstream as well. So you can say that they have good credentials. They work for ABC, they work for BBC, they work for Al Jazeera. But these are individuals that are searchers of the truth and have a better dialogue to offer you and I. Go on.
Isn't it technically better for Elon Musk to create that website compared to like Facebook? Because like he does have an endless amount of money, so it's not like he's going to be taking the advertisements. Like I get it that you're going from like millionaire to millionaire, and they're both doing the same thing.
Billionaire to billionaire, for sure.
But still, isn't it technically better to listen to his? Because it's not going to be as false, I guess, or biased compared to that one.
So the question is, isn't it better to have Elon Musk's solution as opposed to Facebook's solution? That's a really good question. I'm going to play devil's advocate and argue the opposite, just for the sake of the debate, and say Elon Musk is doing things for himself. So it's being driven by his personal agenda. Now his personal agenda may be good, bad or ugly. We're not arguing that secondary point. Facebook, however, has a fiduciary duty to make money for its stockholders. And it has a duty to its users for a positive end product. If one of them is compromised, Facebook collapses. If all of us said we no longer trust Facebook, then we will leave it. It collapses. So it has not a duty to itself, as in one person, i.e. Elon Musk. It has a financial duty to make sure that it's making money. And the only way it makes money is if it shrugs off these questions about its legitimacy, whether it's able to be trustworthy, and so on and so forth. If it doesn't come with the right solution, all of us en masse may turn away from it. So it has to provide a better solution. Secondly, at the moment, Musk is not going to be regulated. If he opens up something and regulations exist, then he has to be in line with regulations. Facebook, if it doesn't sort itself out internally, it will come under external regulation. It doesn't want that. So it has to sort itself out. So I'm not agreeing or disagreeing. I'm showing you the other side of the argument. What do you think?
I mean, Facebook's already compromised because like
massively.
Yeah, so I feel like it doesn't have the trust from people anyway. So is that really going to make a difference?
How many? Do you trust Facebook? No. Not really. But you still go on it. That's the problem. Facebook knows that. Even though we don't trust it, we have to turn to it. Because it's not just about the news. We end up wanting to see what each other are doing because it's a global social media platform. So even though you don't want the news, you have to get it anyway. Because your friends are reporting the news to you. They're becoming citizen journalists. So these are the topics that some of them we didn't get into. We wanted to talk about citizen journalism. And it becomes too long a series and we have other topics that we want to talk about. But it's a good point that you raised. We'll have to see the proof in the pudding. As both Elon and Mark Zuckerberg produce their kind of internal regulations and what they're offering, we'll end up seeing which one is better. And then you can report back and tell us which ones. Yeah, let us know. Fadal.
Question about media in the Middle East. So you basically recommended some individuals who are journalists.
Yes.
Exactly. So in the Middle East, everything is controlled by officials and authorities. And whenever there is a journalist or anyone who's interested in showing a different narration, they get in trouble and they get arrested. So in that case, I don't know, how could we find the truth?
Yes. So the point raised was that in the Middle East, everything is controlled by officials, either by government or by royal family and such. So when there is a counter-narrative, they simply just arrest the journalists, kill the journalists, whatever it may be. So how do we deal with that? The first thing is, as we stated, that we are not expert. I am not an expert on the Middle East. That's why I couldn't present it. So I'm going to have to defer to your answers and your recommendations. Secondly, we are recommending certain journalists who may be working outside of those parameters, those shackles. So we recommended, for example, if you want to know what's happening in Palestine, Yemen, Bahrain, we've given you very good journalists that are very experienced, that are either on the ground or have the context on the ground to show you what's happening, rather than having to go to CNN or go to those types of state-based journalists that Bahrain or Hijaz might end up showing us. So that would be my second recommendation. My third recommendation, we all need to stand up. They can't kill us all. They can't arrest us all. And if they do, then so be it. So those who are in that struggle, and that's happening on the ground in Bahrain, there are those who are just thrown into the dungeons. They are being starved. They are not getting medical, checks. They're languishing inside the prisons. If 1, 5, 10, 50 people do it, they can pick off those 10, 50 people. If more and more people become involved, it becomes harder and harder for them to throw everyone in jail, to kill everybody. So that's part of what a revolution is. Part of the revolution has always been the unity, understanding what our leadership tells us about the circumstances on the ground, and going in the direction that is needed. If it costs us, it costs us. Hayhat min Abdullah. It's easy for me to sit here and say that, and I recognize that, but there are people that are doing that. And if more people stand up, then inshallah we will be able to get the truth out wherever it may be. You had your hand up. No, you moved slightly your hand. It means that you have to say something now. So think.
In Bahrain, they are giving citizenship to Pakistani Sunnis, Wahhabis, and they are brutal toward the population.
And they are stripping citizenship from Shia. Yeah. In the last week, more than 100 people have had their citizenship revoked. Since the uprising started, I think it's 800 Shia have had their citizenship revoked. I actually have the exact numbers. I posted them on my Facebook a couple of days ago. So as you said, this is part of what's known as repopulation. So for example, in Syria, one of the accusations would be, or one of the issues would be now, we have to rebuild the country. In Iraq, we have to rebuild the country. There's been mass internal displacement, and there's been refugees and emigrants leaving the country. So when those countries try to repopulate their country, are they going to repopulate it with the people who are their supporters or not? These are questions. So in Syria, will you see that certain types of people are no longer back allowed in the country, and only certain other people are allowed in the country? Similar questions in Iraq. And in Bahrain, this is called war through population. So they are trying to change the numbers. It's something like 80% is Shia in Bahrain? Something like that, more than that, 90% is Shia? The idea is over a generation is to change that. I suppose if you listen to our friend Tommy Robinson and Muhammad Tawhidi, they would say it's jihad migration or jihad population, as you heard. But these things in that sense, are happening at a governmental level.
Because I was like in Bahrain airport, and I witnessed like Pakistanis, they were talking to each other, and they say, "I am citizen now," and it was laughing, telling those things to the other friend. And I was sitting there. So.
These are all things that need to be known. Thank you very much for your time. We're still wanting your constructive feedback and your dua, inshallah. Tomorrow, the discussion will be on artificial intelligence and the role artificial intelligence will have on ijtihad. And it's just a topic for you and I to appreciate what's happening in contemporary world. Inshallah, we'll have time for it after the interfaith program.
Are we having tomorrow interfaith? Or no?
Tomorrow is the interfaith program, I believe.
That's before.
That's before. And then afterwards, we'll like this session, which won't start later, inshallah, will start kind of 9:30, 9:45 as normal. Then we will have our topic on AI. Again, the recommendation, please bring a friend, bring a colleague. We want them to understand Islam better. And you guys are all the ambassadors for Islam. Please raise your hands, let us join each other in dua. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the appearance of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, to allow us to be alongside him at all times in our life and in our death. If we are to pass away from this world, Ya Allah, raise us from our grave so that we partake in the victories of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. Ya Allah, there are many people around the world going through such desperate times, those people in a state of war, oppression, poverty, homelessness, disease and disaster. We ask you, Ya Allah, grant them more safety, security and victory for the sake of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. Ya Allah, we have been fasting today, reciting our Quran today. Help us to improve our fast, help us to achieve our goals in this blessed month of Ramadan. Help us to reach the nights of Layali al-Qadr, to maximize those nights and to have our hajat accepted. Ya Allah, we have been discussing the challenges of the media, where we get our information from, where we believe, and where we can help people. Help us to be able to navigate these challenges for the best, to be able to help our communities and our world. Walhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tonight we have commemorated the demise of Lady Khadija alayhi salam, for the reward going to her, and with all of our hajat seeking her intercession, let us conclude with 3 loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
It's all algorithms, it doesn't work.
Yeah.